All right, so today we're gonna look at every difference between the 17 Pro Max and the 14 Pro Max. So last year I did this between the 14 Pro Max and the 16 Pro Max, and you guys really liked that further distance between comparisons because, to be honest, when people compare the 16 and the 17, there is differences, but the amount of people going from the 16 to the 17 is going to be way less than people with a 2 to 3 year old phone or even older looking to upgrade to the latest and greatest. First, we're going to address the build and the design because obviously that's the most noticeable change between these two. So on the 17 Pro Max, you have this aluminum unibody design. The entire phone is made out of this aluminum brick basically. And then they have a cutout of ceramic shield glass on the back, which makes it way less likely for this back glass to shatter, but it still has MagSafe and wireless charging and all of those features. Then on the 14 Pro Max, you have the older design with the stainless steel side. This is before they even went to titanium for a couple years. They have a full glass back, glass camera bump and everything like that versus the 17. We definitely know that the 14 Pro Max back glass can shatter relatively easily. We have some proof of that. Here's my cousin's 14 Pro Max. It's seen better days. This was just one drop on the concrete basically that did all that damage. Well, not even from a high area or anything, but yeah, makes it pretty hard to sell as new or even get anything for that when you want to move on from that phone. And thankfully the screen didn't shatter because of the ceramic shield, but the back glass did. But now this year, ceramic shield is on the back as well, and there's just less glass on the phone. So the glass is never really making that direct impact. There's more metal to protect it. That does come at somewhat of a cost, as I'm sure you've probably seen some videos on by now that this aluminum can scratch easier than, of course, glass and even the titanium from the last couple of years and the stainless steel before it. That makes sense. It's a softer metal, but that means it absorbs impact a lot better. It's also way better at dispersing the heat. I mean, there's a reason phones have been made out of aluminum for a long time, and they're going back to that because it's the right material to make phones out of, even with the few trade-offs it has. None of those dings or scratches are going to affect performance and functionality, and it's not shattered glass on the back of your phone versus all these other phones that, yeah, maybe they won't scratch as much and they'll look nicer for longer until you have that one fateful day where you drop it on concrete or something and it just shatters everywhere. And then there's no going back. It makes it way less usable versus a couple scratch marks. If you watch Jerry Rick Everything's video, you probably know that especially right at the edge of this camera plateau is the worst part for the anodization because it's such a sharp edge. The layer of anodizing that Apple used just can't really adhere properly to that edge. So it's going to chip the fastest and the easiest out of any of them. But everywhere else, even like a coin or a key, doesn't scratch super easily. I have seen some people be able to scratch the sides with a key, but sometimes I see that they just kind of rub off and wear off too. So it can really depend. I think the blue and the orange are gonna look the worst with those kind of scratches too, because the color underneath is so much different than the color on top. If you are really worried about small scratches like that, honestly, get the silver one. It's going to be a lot less noticeable because it's pretty much the color of aluminum. And so that's gonna be a safer bet, and scratches will just not really be noticeable. But yeah, all I have to say, I am a big fan of the new design. I think the trade-offs are worth the advantages to this. I think this is the most pro feeling iPhone Pro, and I think it should have had 8K. It doesn't have 8K video recording. I'm going to keep commenting on that until Apple changes it. But that's the main back of the phone differences. Then if we turn it around to the front side, there is definitely still a difference here as well. You can see how much thicker the bezels are. I mean, from the 16 and 17, there's like no difference. From the 15 to the 17, there's a little difference. But from the 14 and older to the 17 Pro Max, you can see that bezel difference and how much more screen you get on the 17. For example, here's just like a white Apple Notes page here, and you can just see clearly where the screen ends on both of them. And I'm sure you can tell that the overall phone itself is just taller and the screen is just bigger. This is a 6.9 inch screen versus a 6.7 inch screen on the 14 Pro Max. So you're getting more screen space with the same width on the phone itself. As you can see here, they are the virtually exact same width. Maybe the ever so slightly more on the 17 Pro Max, but not a noticeable amount at all. And then they are just slightly taller on the 17 Pro Max, but a decently larger screen. And that is, again, thanks to those thinner bezels and just optimizing the space a lot better here on the 17 Pro Max. And you can probably see that in this lighting, the 17 is brighter. They are set to about the same. Looks like the 14's a little bit dimmer set to, and they're also now adjusting and changing their brightness, but let's make them both max brightness. They're not too different here in natural lighting. I do feel like the viewing angles are better on the 17, as looking at it from my perspective here, this looks a lot cooler than the 17 does. It looks like it loses some of that true tone nature of the display. Where direct on, there's not as much of a difference, but yeah, from the side angles, the image is not as nice looking. It also, like the 16 Pro Max, can go down to 1 nit of brightness, so it can actually get even dimmer too, which normally is not a big deal, but in a low light scenario, sometimes you want as little light on the screen as possible so you're not blinding yourself in the middle of the night or things like that. So this one gets even darker than the 14 Pro Max. And the last thing about the design is just the fact that the edges of the phone are a lot more rounded on the 17 Pro Max. Even from the 16 to the 17, you feel much more rounded edges, a lot more comfortable to hold in your hand. Now, if you're putting on a case, it probably doesn't matter that much, but even the cases should still be more rounded because of this. And yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan of how this feels in your hand to hold, and it's lighter than the 14 Pro Max as well, even with being a bigger phone. Yeah, I'm all for these design changes. I think this is a fantastic looking phone. There is no black this year, so this is the closest color you can have to black, and as you can see, it's very much not a black, but it is about as close as you can get. It's the dark color of the year, and I'm still a huge fan of it. I love this deep blue, and I love the redesign of the 17 Pro Max. All right, so enough on the actual shape and build of the phone themselves. Let's talk about what's inside and under the hood. This has the A19 Pro chip on the 17, and the 14 has the A16 chip. This has a 6-core GPU, and this has a 5-core GPU. So there is definitely gonna be a graphic performance difference. So we're gonna run a few benchmarks here. I'm not big on benchmarks, as I think sometimes they don't show the real world examples too well, but this will give a good idea of some of the differences. And for those who do like benchmarks, definitely watch them, see all the results. But if you're not a fan of them, look at the time codes and the chapters down below and just skip right past to the next section. So we're gonna start with Geekbench 6 and just run a CPU benchmark. As you can see, the 17 Pro Max actually has 12 gigabytes of memory. It never shows the full amount because Geekbench never has access to all the RAM on the device. But yeah, 11.4, so it definitely has 12 gigabytes of RAM, where the 14 only has 6. That is literally double the RAM on the 17. So this should be performing a lot of these things way, way better. Looks like it has not been able to update Geekbench yet to name the Apple A19 Pro. It just calls it an ARM chip. You can also see the clock speed here is much higher at 4.26 versus 3.46. Both on iOS 26 And yeah, that's all you need to know here. So let's start the CPU benchmark. Okay, so now they both finished. The 17 Pro Max did finish about 40 seconds faster. That doesn't tell us a whole lot though, but if we look at these scores, there is definitely a significant improvement on the CPU performance of the A19 Pro chip, as there should be over a few years. But yeah, and we can see that there is 6 cores on both of them, 2 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. So all that is pretty consistent. Again, double the RAM though on the new one, which I'm sure helps with some of these tests. And if we compare it to some others out there, this device is beating 16 Pro Max and anything older. Even the iPad Pro 11th gen with the M2 chip in there, which is pretty incredible. It's performing better than some laptop level chips. I believe in some tests this does better than the M4 chip as well. I don't know why it doesn't show that one in the lineup here. And its multi-core is almost as good as the M2 chip as well, which again, for a phone chip, that is quite impressive. And I've never felt like the performance on the 14 Pro Max was super lacking or anything. But yeah, that's the CPU difference. We're going to do a quick GPU benchmark test, and then you're going to see a stress test, which I think is going to be the bigger difference between these two, as you'll actually be able to see the thermal performance and improvements on the 17 Pro Max versus the 14 Pro Max with that stress test. All right, now they have both completed, and the 17 Pro Max definitely completed it a lot faster, almost in double the time, and it's got almost double the score. So it is a significant improvement for GPU. It definitely helps having an additional core and all that extra memory. As you can see, it's actually in this test beating the M2 chip again in the iPad Pro 11-inch. And that is quite the feat for just a phone processor. Now, obviously, these aren't stress testing the CPU or the GPU here. It's just a quick 1 to 3 minute test, getting some basic benchmarks. But next test is the 3D Mark test. This is the recommended test for the 14, only because the 14 Pro Max doesn't actually have ray tracing. So this one tests for ray tracing and stuff like that as well. And because this device doesn't even have 8 gigabytes of RAM, it can't even do the Steel Nomad Lite. So we'll have to dumb down the test for the 17 Pro Max and test the Wildlife Extreme stress test. So now both phones have finished the extreme stress test here. And the first thing I noticed about the 17 Pro Max is honestly that it looks a lot dimmer than the 14 Pro Max, which is interesting considering it's supposed to have better thermal performance. But overall, the scores are definitely still better on the 17, but the stability is really not much of an improvement. Actually, it's slightly worse. So I'm not really seeing a lot of thermal improvements other than the fact that the chip itself is just better. And maybe that's kind of what Apple did here. Maybe they just used the extra thermal room to just push the chip even longer and faster and harder. But yeah, kind of an interesting result here. And it's definitely cooling faster now that I've held them for a little bit longer. But yeah, its screen is still dimmer than the 14 Pro Max. Also, there are 2 more buttons on the 17 Pro Max than the 14 Pro Max. There is the action button instead of the silent switch. And then there's also the camera control button right here on the side. And how are these buttons helpful, and are they worth the upgrade? Not really, but both of them are nice to have. Especially the action button. I'm a huge fan of that. I have it mapped to ChatGPT Live right now, so it will open up and start talking to ChatGPT, which that is cool. And you can basically map that to whatever. You can have it set up to a shortcut. You can do really anything with it. These are some of the default options, which is just silent mode, focus mode, camera, visual intelligence, which is not an option on the 14, obviously, it doesn't even have Apple Intelligence, flashlight, voice memo, the Shazam, recognizing music, translating, magnifier, or a control center control, which is how I do the ChatGPT voice mode, and then some shortcuts or accessibility things, or no action if you really just don't want that button to do anything. It is an option, you can do it. So that is nice to have. I do prefer it over the silent switch, only because personally I leave my phone on silent the entire time, so just having that in the control center is totally fine for me versus a physical switch to do that. Now there was some nicety to being able to comfortably know that your phone was on silent by flicking that switch and just feeling that and knowing it's on silent, but I prefer the customization of the action button for the 17. Now the camera control button I could live without. It's not really a necessity to me. I pretty much use it as a shortcut to open the camera, which it does that pretty well. And that's about it. I don't really use it as a shutter button. Maybe sometimes in landscape, I might click it to take the picture, but most of the time I'm still just tapping the button here. And I don't really use the haptics for switching between lenses, or you can have it just do zoom in general. And it's kind of cool to try. I actually recommend everyone try it if they have one of these camera control buttons. It's fun to try and mess around with, but as soon as you realize what it is, you don't really want to use it, because you realize that zooming in like this is actually way easier to do with your thumb, and it's just not practical to use the camera control button really ever. So that's why Apple actually disables those features of all the half press functions by default out of the box here with 17 Pro Max. It's just a shortcut to open your camera app, which is a little sad. And it's also a shortcut into visual intelligence, which that, if they keep working on this feature, could be the thing to make or break the camera control button, but they just really got to make this a little bit better. See, it sees this plant here. It's guessing what the plant might be. This is also a fake plant, but I mean, it might be right that this is what it's trying to mimic. That's actually pretty interesting. You can also just search Google for this and see if you can find a similar plant or whatnot there. If I snap a photo of my logo and ask it to look it up, yeah, look at that. It finds my Graf-X tech stuff. So that's actually pretty cool. I do think visual intelligence has potential. I forget it's there a lot, so I'm not really thinking to go ahead and use it to find things, but it is a nice to have. That's the big thing with the camera control button, is like once they get Apple Intelligence working a lot better, which I do believe they're trying to do, they just aren't really promising anything because they overpromised one time, so they're just really being careful to not overpromise again, so they just haven't been talking about it really. But once they get Apple Intelligence to a better spot, I think that button will feel more useful. But as of right now, it's something I could easily go without. And that also just brings me to Apple Intelligence support in general. It's so not a big issue. I actually switched away from my 16 Pro Max for the week before I got the 17 Pro Max and used this exact 14 Pro Max. Did I miss Apple Intelligence? Not really. I just use ChatGPT when I want AI stuff. I don't use Apple Intelligence for that stuff. Now, I like the animation of Siri better on the Apple Intelligence enabled devices. I think it's a lot better looking, but that's an animation. They're locking it to Apple Intelligence supported devices, but it's not really needing that. And the fact that Siri can call on ChatGPT is kind of nice, and then you can sign into your account if you have one and all that kind of stuff. Kind of nice to have that in Siri, but it's still, most of the time, easier to just go to the ChatGPT app and do everything in there than worrying about going through Apple Intelligence. It's just not there yet. And the few things that work, like image playgrounds and Genmoji, are just so silly and they just don't do anything for me. As of right now, Apple Intelligence is just not worth it. Then I want to talk about battery life really quick, and battery life is a huge improvement on the 17 Pro Max, especially if you're in the United States. You get the eSIM only model, which has an even bigger battery than the other 17 Pro Maxes, but just in general, they are going to be a pretty big improvement over the 14 Pro Max. I believe this is rated for 39 watch time hours, and the 14 Pro Max only has 29 hours, as you can see right here. So yeah, 10 more hours of video playback supposedly on the 17 Pro Max, which I do believe that its battery is significantly better. Now, I'm not going to do a battery test with my devices here because this is not a brand new 14 Pro Max. This has been used for the last 3 years. So I don't think that's a fair assessment. With a brand new battery, this will do better than this particular one. I know that the 14 Pro Max's battery never like shocked me and how good it was. Honestly, the 13 Pro Max was better in my experience than the 14 Pro Max. I had both of those. And the 13 Pro Max was the last big leap in battery, and it was a big leap. And then the 14 Pro Max was kind of a slight step backwards, and at least not really an improvement, just because they were starting to add a lot more heavier features like the dynamic island, that new animations. They had the always on display for the first time. They had a bigger sensor, 48 megapixel for the first time. So all that stuff started taking more battery. But now this phone is just simply bigger with a simply bigger battery, and it just does a better job at that. The other thing that's kind of related more towards the hardware is some of the camera upgrades, but also the port on the bottom. So this is a USB 3 Gen 2 port on the 17 Pro Max, and the 14 is still the old school Lightning port that has USB 2.0 speeds. It is literally 20 times faster on the 17 Pro Max for data transfer, and it has way more supportive accessories that you can do on there, way more external drives you can connect to. It is just a incredibly better port. You also have consistency between the iPads and the MacBooks, and now MacBooks do have the MagSafe connector too, but they also have USB-C that they can still be charged by. So you just could have one cord to rule them all and keep just like one cord in your bag if you wanted to, and at least they can all be charged with the same cord. And that is just really, really nice. And it should have been a thing sooner. It really should have been. I still think that it's ridiculous that the base model 17 and 16 and 15 and the iPhone Air all only have USB 2.0 speeds. They have the USB-C port instead of Lightning, but the speeds have not changed from Lightning. And that is just ridiculous. Why are they arbitrarily limiting it? It's probably like more expensive to make it worse. I don't know, probably not, but it feels like it's just ridiculous because even the cheapest Android phone usually does not have a USB 2.0 speed port anymore. That's just a little bit of disappointment, but if you get the Pro models, and from a 15 Pro and up, you get that USB 3.0 Gen 2 port. That is 10 gigabits per second transfer speeds. It's insane. It's so much better, and you can support a lot of different kinds of external drives, which I have definitely done, especially with my 15 Pro Max and 16. Yeah, have a lot more storage that way, especially if you want to record in ProRes or the new ProRes RAW format. It's going to take up a lot of space. So having external drives connected is going to be a lifesaver, unless you're willing to spend $2,000 for the 2 terabyte version. So, and I'm not. So yeah, that is the port situation. Way better on the 17 Pro Max. And if you're trying to use your phone professionally at all, that alone could be worth the upgrade. Just like the 16 Pro Max, the MagSafe and Qi 2 charging goes up to 25 watts on the 17 Pro Max versus just 15 on the 14. However, you have to make sure you have the updated accessories to support that, where like my bedside MagSafe charger is still the old school one, so it doesn't support the newer 25 watts. So it's still maxed out at 15, but it's the one I use when I go to sleep and charge it overnight. So it doesn't really matter to me. I'm not gonna upgrade it. But if you have a newer generation MagSafe charger, it can get better speeds, and the charging speed in general is just faster on this phone. They're saying it gets up to closer to 40 or even 42 watts. So a 45 watt brick is kind of a must-have if you want to get the maximum speeds of the iPhone 17 now, where this one maxes out around 25 to 28 watts. And yeah, as I was explaining earlier, the brightness isn't too different. You can see though now we have some outdoor shots with it, and the brightness was not that noticeably different, even though it's supposedly 1,000 nits higher peak brightness. But as time went on, you could see the advantage of the better cooling system in the 17 Pro Max, where after more time, the difference was more noticeable, as the 17 Pro Max did not dim as fast as the 14 Pro Max. And then just some really quick stat things. On connectivity, the 17 Pro Max does have Wi-Fi 7 and the next gen ultra wideband chip. So some better connections to Wi-Fi signals, Bluetooth, Thread integration, all that kind of stuff, where this has a much more outdated system for that, but it's still not bad. I mean, I've used it in my system. I mean, I only have Wi-Fi 6, I think, at my home. Most people don't have Wi-Fi 7 yet. It's more for future proofing, but that's the thing. This is getting less and less future proof as it is getting more and more outdated, and this will last a lot longer, especially if you don't have either of these phones and you're deciding between them. This will last you a lot longer than the 14 Pro Max. All right, so technically this is a different 14 Pro Max, but this has cellular in it and the other one didn't. So we're gonna do a quick cellular test and see if the redesign of the antenna all around the camera bump here, and also the 5G antenna right up top, if this gives it some better speed, which a lot of people are saying it does. We are in like a basement right now, so I don't expect the speeds to be phenomenal, but there should still be a difference between these two phones. So the results are over double the download speed, about the same upload, not really much better on the 17 Pro Max, but the download speed is significantly better. Now, you'll also see us doing a test outside at this time and the difference there. So yeah, it's actually a pretty big difference between the 14 and the 17 for the same provider. They're both on Verizon, they're both in the same area, and yeah, that's quite the difference. We'll do one more test just to make sure it wasn't some kind of fluke. So again, download is like 3 times faster basically on the 17 Pro Max, but the upload was half the speed. So I don't know what was going on with upload there. That's interesting. But download is what most people are using 90% of the time. That's how you stream video and all that kind of stuff. The better the speeds are that you're getting, that means in a low signal area, you're going to be doing a lot better with the 17 Pro Max versus the 14 Pro Max. In a good signal spot, are you going to notice much of a difference? No, absolutely not, because as long as you're getting enough signal to do what you need to do, it's not a problem. And then there's a good amount of camera differences, and we went out to a park and got to shoot a lot of these camera differences here. So the main thing is all 3 lenses on the back of this phone are 48 megapixel, where on the 14 Pro Max, only the main lens with a 48 megapixel lens. The ultra wide was still 12 and the telephoto was 12, and it was a 3x telephoto versus a 4x, with it being 48 megapixel now has an 8x optical quality lens as well. I mean, they call it a separate lens, it's not really, but it is 8x quality. So that is a significantly better zoom and zoom range. You can go up to 40 times versus only 15 times on the 14 Pro Max. The quality on zoom should be significantly better. However, I don't know, you let me know, do the ultra wide and the main cameras, do they seem like they've really changed a whole lot? I'm no professional photographer. I'm not really touching up these photos a lot to make them look their best or anything like that. So there's probably someone else out there that can do an even better test here, but this is just to give you an idea of the average person taking a photo with either one of these cameras, which one's gonna get you a better looking result. Or if you can't really tell the difference, well then don't worry about the camera that much. The reality is the 14 Pro Max is still a good camera for most people out there. I like the 17 Pro Max being unified with all three of them 48 megapixel. So for video and photos, I just know whichever one I take it on, it's still gonna be a pretty consistent image between them. I feel more confident recording 4K video on any lens I want to, and they come me out good 4K quality and on par with everything else. So I'm a huge fan that they made those all the same, and just the redesign of the camera bump in general allowed for more space on the for the telephoto lens to have that bigger sensor. So not only is it better zoom, but it's also like a 50% larger sensor. So more light is getting in, all that kind of stuff. So big improvements to the camera. Still no 8K though. Still no 8K. And why? No good reason. No good reason. There should be 8K. It's got the thermal performance for it. It's got the lens performance for it. It should be shooting in 8K video. But you do have 4K at 120 still, like the 16 Pro Max, and you don't have that on the 14 Pro Max. And the next gen photographic styles that I never use, so don't worry about that too much. And then you also do have the ability to shoot spatial photos and videos. Again, I've never once tried to do that, so it's not a huge issue for me. But yeah, there's supposedly better photo processing and better smart HDR. The photonic engine got improved, which is still sounds like a Star Trek weapon to me. You have proper Dolby Vision support and just things like that. So it is improved. The camera is definitely better, and I'm sure you can see from some of these examples we're showing you that there is improvements. Are they leaps and bounds better? Not really. I mean, the iPhone camera kind of has a look to it, so you're either gonna kind of like that look or not. And the photographic styles helps you change that look a little bit, but ultimately it still looks like an iPhone photo. What is a lot better though is portrait mode processing has gotten a step above competition even, and a step above what it used to be. So the portrait modes on the iPhone 17 Pro look great. I don't see a big improvement with cinematic mode, and I'm not a huge fan that they lock it to the 1 and 2x sensors and lenses. I don't see why they need to do that. I think they can easily add in the ultra wide and the telephoto and support those two. They should be high enough resolution, but they do. And they lock it down to that. Overall, it is a better camera, a better video camera, and for someone who does make videos with their iPhone all the time, I will appreciate the upgrades there. But not as many people will see all those things as huge improvements. You'll have to see these examples and decide for yourself. So this also has the same feature the 16 Pro Max does, which is the spatial audio recording, where it can record a more fuller sound stage, and you can go in after the fact in their audio mix and isolate the voice better, or change who you're hearing in frame and all that stuff. It's neat. I honestly am not a huge fan of the microphones Apple puts in the iPhone for some reason. I think even the S25's microphones sound better to me than the 17 Pro Max. And I just don't understand why that is. I think the microphones should just be better. The software features of isolating things, that's all fine. But because the bass audio is just not that great, even cutting out some of the background noise, it doesn't sound anything like the microphone I'm using right now. Like, I will always try to plug that in and use it whenever possible. I don't like producing a video purely on the iPhone's microphones. So this should be a microphone test of both of these cameras as well. So right now you're hearing the 17 Pro Max and you're seeing it record me, and there's definitely some wind noise here, so I'll use the audio mix feature that Apple introduced on the 16 to try to get rid of some of that background noise. But I'm not sure how well that will actually work, and it's definitely messing with my hair right now, but that's okay. And now you're hearing the 14 Pro Max. A little less wind noise probably right now, but still in the same outdoor environment. And let me know if you think the camera looks less stable on this shot as well, or anything like that, because with the new selfie camera on the 17 Pro Max, it definitely makes it a little stabler because it's always cropping and keeping your face in frame as best as it can, almost like the action mode on the rear cameras. So that is really nice to see. And we're gonna go into a little bit of shade here and see if everything still looks good. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty good so far. There might be some echo in this room, but yeah, let me know in the comments down below which one of these you think actually did a better job, or if you think the microphones have gotten so much better over 3 years, or if this 3-year-old phone is still doing just fine and looking just as good as the brand new 17 Pro Max. Let me know all that down in the comments below. Yeah, and then obviously another big camera improvement is the front selfie camera. That is a big difference. So the widest it goes on the 14 is this, and the widest on the 17 Pro Max is this shot. So significantly wider, and then you can also, right from here, tap and turn it landscape mode and get an even wider shot where you could not do that on the 14 Pro Max. And you can go right back to portrait mode, and that's just really handy for getting those group shots and getting more people in the frame. And yeah, I'm never gonna be mad at Apple making convenient features like that. I honestly don't know why more companies haven't added that. I think that's a great idea. And I think people will follow Apple in that and add a square sensor up there to allow for more flexibilities for selfie and for video too. You can have a full 4K 30 even in log and ProRes with landscape mode, holding your phone in portrait. And it's just way more comfortable to hold that way when you don't have any kind of gimbal or anything like that with you. It's a lot easier to hold on to. You're not gonna fall or slip as much, and then you're still centered with the lens. So when you look at the screen, it looks a lot more like you're looking at the person in the video. So it's really handy. I'm a big fan of that camera. And that's gonna be, I feel like, one of the more noticeable improvements for the average user of these two phones. And it is also an improvement across the entire 17 lineup. So the Air has this, the regular 17 has this. So it's not exclusive to the Pros by any means, but it's still a really nice feature. But anyway, guys, that's the differences between the 17 and the 14 Pro Max. Yeah, I'm trying to compare as many of the intricate differences as possible to give you guys a full and complete review. So hopefully the videos and the pictures show enough of the camera performance differences for you guys to get that idea as well. And let me know down in the comments below. I mean, I have used this phone for over a year when it first came out. I used it for the last week again to kind of remind me of what it was like. And now I'm all on the 17 Pro Max. So I'm very familiar with both these phones. So if you got any question about either of them, please let me know in the comments down below. Or if you have anything else you want me to test, let me know that as well. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and of course subscribe to the channel. It really does help us grow and reach more people. And if you are curious about any of the equipment I use in my setup, I'm gonna have that all linked in the description down below. As always, guys, have a great rest of your day.